Hello, Christian. I wanted to talk to you about the work we've been doing recently in the pharmaceutical industry, in production in pharmaceutical industry, and come back on to a project you've been doing recently, where you basically more than doubled the efficiency of the lines, the volumes, and so forth. And to discuss this further in terms of how it was possible, what you learned in doing so. So how did you go through this? We went there together to analyze it, and there was a complete silence in this part of the factory, because although they had several production lines, not a single one was working when we walked in.
Yeah.
And we worked out the OEE, the utilization rates of those equipment, and it was less than 20%, and that was the starting line.
Absolutely. So just to set the scene, it's about packaging, so it's pharmaceutical. And what is not so surprising for pharmaceutical industry is this low OEE rate, which is quite common in this business, and which is, I'd like to say, a good thing for improving the productivity or the performance, because you have a good leverage. When you start solo, with a small action, you generally have a big effect. So that's what we experienced.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
with
you're
right.
Very simple actions, we had a big increase.
Yeah, because the 20% OEE, machines in a good state, ready to go, and competent people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was, as we said, quite easy to find the leverage points and to have this increase of performance. What happened after is also something you know well, Philippe. We moved the bottleneck, which was a piece of equipment in the line. Suddenly it moved upstreams, because the what you have to fill into the packages was no more available, because everything was streamlined for this poor performance. And as soon as you are better off, so you are just draining the supplies.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a real problem. We had to shift our focus to upstreams. And there is a second thing, which is quite, I'd like to say, specific to pharma, which is you have this batch stock, which is documentation which has to travel with the product, because you have to match perfectly between the product you are producing or packaging and the old documentation. This is a regulation, it's mandatory. So it's very easy to improve the physical flow of the medicaments, of the drugs, but it's quite more difficult to speed up the flow for these batch stocks, just because the people which are specifically hired to control the documents, to check them, to make sure that everything is okay, well, they were taken completely by surprise, and they could not match the speeding up of the speed.
Okay. This work was covered by a complete lean program of this big pharmaceutical company. They were trying to implement the Toyota way of doing things specific to their industry, and therefore adapting it. And I wanted to get your feedback on how all these people were living that discovery of lean. Because I watched it in fascination. It was slightly different from other industries. My main surprise maybe was everything to do with standards, because I know that in other industries I have quite a tough time trying to get people to write standards and then to adhere to standards, and that's part of the Toyota production system thing. And this wasn't the problem with them. They because they live with standards before.
That's true. They have plenty of standards, so it's quite the opposite than other businesses. In the other businesses, you have to convince them that they go to have some standards. in the pharma, they have many of them, so they won't be surprised if they have to do something in a slightly different way. It's just because they are accustomed to comply to the standards. With maybe one exception, which is that the people on the shop floor do not mind to comply to this, let's say, lean standards, but the people creating the standards, well, they are usually very afraid to change them. So if you try to convince, because of, let's call it lean program or whatsoever, that we should slightly change the way of doing, well, they are just scared because they do not want to have any risk for the safety, for the quality, or for compliance. So the constraint is not the people on the shop floor not going to accept the standards, it's more to adapt the standards to another way of doing. So this is quite a surprise and maybe specific to pharma, I'd like to say.
Another thing that I noticed was that you worked a lot on the relationship between production and maintenance, and that was one of the keys to success in improving the OEE.
Yeah. So this is something we see quite often in the other industries as well. You have a kind of a separation between production and maintenance, and quite often they fight or they do not really cooperate. And at some point it was also the case in this company. But it was pretty easy to get the maintenance to get back to the, to the supplier relationship to production, because they just wanted to be part of it. All the attention of the management was more focused on the production, because we need to get the products out, and maintenance was just, well, you are here to tend the machines and to do the setups and the changeovers and so on, but they were not really considered, or they were not totally part of the team. So in working to get them closer to the production and have more dialogue between production and the maintenance, it went well. So now they are really cooperating finally.
It seems to me the other thing, which was I assume specific to pharmaceutical industry or other industries that are similar, was that the machines were in basically very good order, because the standards and so forth, the annual breakdown, they did change all those parts and so forth, so there was not, like you find in some poorer industries, a machine that hadn't been properly maintained. And so the machines were in great shape, all shiny and clean and so forth, and the very poor results were, not all, but most of them, and most of the initial things you found were just silly mistakes, silly little things that were ideal material to be solved by the joint team of the production people and the engineers, because it was stuff like I don't know, there was dust accumulating in this part of the thing, so the machine it's got blind here, or the bottles would move and get blocked in this part of the thing and so forth. So hundreds of tiny little things which were easily solved once they started talking together emerged, and it was quite different from some other work I've done in engineering and maintenance with production, because you unfortunately quite quickly get to the stage where you think, oh my dear, we're really going to have to spend a lot of time and money putting this machine back to to its normal state, and that wasn't the case at all in here. It was, there wasn't really a problem with the checkbook or investing. It was just ideas and problem solving and 5 whys, and everything seemed to have a solution that was human, managerial, or something that would only take 10 minutes to solve.
Yeah, sure. So the thing that surprised me the most was these tiny little things you mentioned were easily overlooked by the engineers, the maintenance people, because probably they expected more complex problems, and they did not even think about it could be a simple cause. And people on the shop floor, I mean operators, were not allowed usually to touch or to fiddle with the machines, so they probably were not used as well to to get to the root cause of the problem. So just making them dialogue for people which are running the machines to talk, to say what they experience, and the engineers to just consider simple things. Well, it just appeared, as you said, simple causes, easy to fix, and up we go.
Absolutely. So I saw that hundreds, as I say, of silly little problems being solved very quickly at the beginning, and the performance ramping up. And then a bit later, some real quite complex problems appeared. I'm thinking of the broken bottles, and you solved that. We'll try not to mention the name of the camera, but you solved that with a high-speed camera.
It was indeed
a little small thing some people have up here.
Absolutely. Well, it's a heavy duty, and for the out, how do you call that?
Yeah, people use
raiding
a GoPro, right? Okay,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
You can go deep on that. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it was great because it helped capture the moment where there was a stress on the bottle and the bottle just exploded, and we could see this in high definition and in slow motion, so it was quite impressive.
To describe the problem, the bottle was breaking inside the machine, and we all had theories about it's this, it's that, it's the bottle, it's whatever, but nobody knew how it broke.
Yeah.
And so, because the GoPro camera is small and good and powerful, it was put right next to inside the machine.
Yes.
Closed it up, and we ran it until the bottle broke, and then we could actually see how it broke. It was
yes,
just,
and we were fortunate enough to capture the exact moment when it happened.
The film is perfect. You could, from then on it was easy to solve. But
absolutely.
Okay, so that's a little trick that can be used well outside the pharmaceutical industry, by the way, which we use and reuse, but makes things simpler for that kind of problem solving. Okay, so well, thank you very much, and I found it all very interesting because it's true that, as you say, the potential for improvement is enormous and very rapidly, because there's nothing that will take money or time that really needs to be solved. And quite a lot of it is to do with just getting the people to work together in a different way with different ambitions, and that seems to enable doubling or tripling the performance, at least based on this particular case.
Absolutely. And you remember when we say most of the competitors have the same equipment, it's just the way of using it that make the difference, and this is the perfect illustration for it.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.